we ready to roll here, so to speak? And we have one that we need to jump. Right there. Okay. So I'm going to call the meeting to order, and we welcome Chief McQuillan and is it
Captain
Miller. So the titles.
Yep.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So for this week's presentation on the budget, and I've asked Lori to kind of go over some of the spreadsheets first, just to give us an overview, and then the chief has gone through the questions. He and Chad have gone through the questions, and they'll be answering those questions that we submit. Just for your information, you and Roger's information, by Tuesday afternoon, we, the committee members submit questions ahead, so the department heads can prepare their answers. That way, we don't have as much lag time and having a question out there and then receiving an answer. We can send those questions to you as well. I should have thought of that earlier, but I will send the questions on to you as well, okay? So Lori, would you like to?
Okay, so the version that I just passed out tonight has the updates on the revenue sheet. The very first sheet is preliminary 2021, and I was able to plug in the numbers from the preliminary tax rate form for 2021 that we're working on right now. So I had questions before about.
Can you hold up the sheet that you're looking at?
This would be the cover sheet.
The cover sheet, okay.
Yeah, the very first one. So I guess on the side that shows the revenues, it starts with taxes at the top, licenses, permits, and fees. It shows the different sources. You had questions about the state sources, what came in for this year, so we did get final numbers on that. The meals, the municipal aid, they pretty much played a shell game. The municipal aid is 0, but the meals and rooms tax distribution went up to $436,407. So originally we had 132 for municipal aid and around 300 for meals and rooms tax. So that's what the state did this year. They
So that is less.
I think it's actually just a little bit more. So I think we had 432,868, and they gave us 436,407, all in one category. I think it's.
So that's for 2021, but
Yeah.
going forward for 2022, it's about the same, right?
Yeah, I left at the same estimates until we finalize 21 and see what they're going to do. But I'm not sure if they're going to plan to do the same thing next year or not. I don't know how they can just zero out municipal aid. I guess maybe they can. And then the highway block grant, final number was 173,081. I know we talked about that last time too. So.
Railroad tax, huh?
Yeah, I noticed that in there, so I thought, well, I better include that line. Hadn't noticed that before, but that's what they have on the MS 434 that they revised. And so as you go down, the offsetting revenues in 2021 were $6,384,137. And then when you flip over to the back side, it just funnels down, it includes the votes that we made from taxation 21. And it looks at the estimated tax rate of around 571 is about where we're looking at for 2021.
So it's really hard to know, keep track of when we get the funding and which tax year it goes to. And so the state sources that you just received the numbers for, it will go to the October or whenever, well, it's past October now, but whenever you set the tax rate, those numbers will go on.
It's in this year, 2021.
2021.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So we haven't seen any changes supposedly in that, because I was worried about COVID and how some of the state sources would be affected, and it doesn't seem like meals and rooms. You would think that would be affected,
Stayed
but
pretty even.
it doesn't look like. Would that be? Sometimes there's a lag time, so these numbers might be from the previous year instead of like this last year. And state education monies, that's what happens. You're like 2 years out. So that's not the case here.
No, in fact, I've been on some Zoom calls with, is it Mr. Caswell? With the economic development, and they actually have said that the travel numbers are actually very strong for New
Wow.
Hampshire.
Okay.
And I mean, you would expect it, you know, the drop back, just what you've said, but apparently that's not been the trend. I mean, that actually visitors, and they had massive park season this summer and what have you, so I think maybe more people took trips to like New Hampshire than Orlando.
Yeah.
So maybe, so they, at least from hearing from their end, they hadn't seen a dip in.
So did the rooms outperform themselves vis-a-vis the meals?
I don't know how it breaks down, but they're just saying that they didn't see a real hit from COVID in reference
I
to
guess
the,
I'm surprised that they wouldn't have commented on that, because
yeah.
obviously, we are, just tying in with what you were saying, I mean, obviously in Littleton, I mean, with restaurants that are open less days or whatever, even if they were peak capacity when they were open, you would find it hard to believe they could make up for, you know, the missed days.
And also, not having the employees that they need to stay
That's right.
open, yeah.
So unless the room, I'm really surprised
Yeah.
that they wouldn't have mentioned that, Jim, because, you know, so unless on the room side, one, room prices are up substantially. Motel, hotel prices, Airbnb and whatever, prices are up, so obviously they're collecting a percentage of a larger number.
I think we should check too, because I think they're actually giving back to us a higher percentage than they normally do. But we should probably check into that. Because usually we get 17% maybe back, but I think they were giving back a bigger percent this year.
It'd be nice to.
That's why they zeroed municipal,
Yeah.
so that they could.
It's nice to get the number, but it's nice to have a little confidence in terms of why and how.
Because what we're, the budget that we're studying now, the proposed budget for next year, these numbers are gonna be important to us next year, because we're not getting next year's numbers, so it's kind of still a question mark for the revenues. So anyways, I'm just a worrywart.
Yeah, I think Steve has a good point. I sit on a bank board, and I do know that rooms have been very busy this year, according to the bank information that we have, so. But the meals, you got a good point.
It's just nice, I mean, it doesn't do anything about it, but it'd be nice to know, just moving forward,
Yep.
how things kind of flow
Okay. Any other comments on this? Lori?
Yeah, and the only other change was on the detail of the general fund budget, was the request to divide the benefits back up into each department. I had combined them into one new budget line that showed the total amounts for health insurance and life insurance and disability, but the committee had expressed a desire to see it amongst each department broken down, so it's been restored to be in each department line. So when you see a department total, police was under question last week, so the total police department request for 2022 is $2,201,474 with all of the benefits and everything in there, so.
up. And that compares with what figure did they have last year?
2021 budget was $2,092,410.
And which ones, which contracts are being negotiated this year?
Fire and Public Works.
Fire and Public Works, okay.
And the others, there were no changes with the other special funds, sewer, ambulance, park and rec, but I included those reports again, but there's no changes on those sheets.
The only thing I have to add, and I'm not sure if this was sent out, is there was the question about the highway block grant money. And that comes from, you know, DOT. It's paid out 4 times a year. 60% is distributed in First two payments are in July and October, with the balance being in January and April. So it does fall into 2 tax years for us, but the same year for the state. And it's money that can only be used for construction, reconstruction, and maintenance of each municipality's Class 4 and Class 5 highways. And I'm gonna have to say to you, with Doug in the room, I can't tell you right now what a Class 4 or Class 5 is, but the formula that is used for 18 smaller communities, which we fall into, is a little bit different, but it's really kind of related to your number of lane miles and your population, and then they do some valuation adjustment. So in theory, it's supposed to be $1,437 for each mile of Class 4 and 5. And then they use a factor of $13 per person residing in the municipality. So that's how they kind of come up with a formula in the sense of, and that's our share out of the gas tax.
So Jim, when you say lane miles, let's say we're on a dirt road, narrow dirt road, is that one lane versus?
Well, I think these are
big road
specific
two?
lane miles in reference to state highway miles.
Okay, so the interstate might be 2 and,
Yeah, I can get Doug to, I mean, in terms of what is a 4 and a 5, but I think like 302 is a state highway, you know, their kind of roads, so I don't think it's so much for you to take care of your side roads and your neighborhood roads.
4 or 5 would be more what we would call the back roads.
rural.
Yeah. A 6, which we have some of, I think, in general, you would prefer to walk instead of driving.
Okay. All right, we have them, all right, we use an alphabet system in Florida, and most of the roads are F, so I know what you mean.
But my question
Yeah.
is, lane miles is kind of, why
The
did
two
not just
lane,
say,
yeah.
why did I say street miles, but is
Well-
it 2 lanes versus 1 lane versus 4?
It doesn't say that, I was just reading it directly from
Yeah, okay.
the DOT.
I'm curious though, it's an
Yeah,
odd
yeah,
term.
yeah, but that, yeah, just underlying language, it took straight out of their,
Yeah,
out of
okay.
their issue. But that, so there's a formula that's already set in place, and I guess based on the gas miles, or the money they take in, that formula calculates what comes to us.
All right, devil's in the details.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Lori, do you have anything else?
No, that's it.
Okay, so do you want to go through the budgets a little bit here? Or just overview a little bit, where some of the changes may have been, or like increases, and so everything in the, let's see, yeah, just, we used to kind of, Karen used to kind of just go down and review it a little bit, if you don't mind doing that.
Yes, I mean, I've sent these out since September, I think. I
Yeah.
feel like you guys have had it and had time to look over and things, but not sure what you're wanting to see.
Well,
Each category total or something, I mean, it's,
yeah, you could,
If there's a change, any significant change, increase or decrease from one line, you know, from one year to the next for the proposed.
okay, so those were on the individual department
Mm-hmm.
budgets that I gave to you guys, and there was a narrative page for each department.
Right.
And they kind of went through and spelled out what were the increases and decreases and why. I don't know if you want me to go through every department and review those, but I know they kind of, as you, DPW came in and reviewed, and then police came in and explained their increases, and then Pink Fire will
Well,
go over
I'll-
their budgets today.
I'll start with my questions. I tried to go through the one, I don't have the updated version, I didn't mark it up, but the one that you had handed out
Yeah, if you have
earlier.
Questions, for sure, yeah.
So this is for fire, and I had, in 2020, 475,000, and unspent was 249,000. So I was kind of wondering, you know, going back, why there was 249,000 unspent at the end of the year, and then the 2021 was 524, so that was up, and then we're increasing to 627. So you see
Yeah.
that first line there. Can you
Yes.
just kind of explain a little bit on that, please?
So the permanent positions fire, it's number 014220, for those that are looking for it. In 2020, the budget amount was 475,999. I mean, I can't explain the postings for 2020, we're in the midst of the 2020 audit, but I imagine it has something to do with, you know, the ambulance and how she posted things. But I also think it has to do with the overtime. As you can see right below, there was 127,000 extra in overtime, and yet in the permanent positions, it was 249,000 overspent. So I think it was a matter of things not being posted in the right lines,
Okay.
and probably also with the ambulance being in there being new, there was some confusion. There were some entries made at the end of the year that, I did not change any numbers that were posted in 2020 because that's, you know.
Until you
that's
get the
not my work,
audit.
So.
Okay, all right.
So then 2021, the number 524, 287 was budgeted for. And so far through August, 425 has been spent. So it does show 98,000, excuse me, left to spend. I think that probably when the budgets were created, it was not very accurate in coming up with that 524,000. Again, you look at what was spent the year before, but again, there was confusion with, you know, getting it set up between the ambulance and the fire and the revolving fund. So when we set up 2022, as you see the individual budget sheets, you know, we went employee by employee, who's in the fire department, who's in the ambulance, spelled it all out. So that 627 is a very good number. It's based on their current wages. Of course, you're in the contract year for this department, so it probably will change.
Yeah, so the contract year, so it's,
Yeah.
so there's an increase without even knowing, having a contract negotiated.
I wouldn't say it's an increase, I would say it's a more accurate number, because you can tell 2021 is gonna be overspent, because 524 was not an accurate budget for 2021. So,
And, okay, and was there an increase in number of employees?
2, wasn't
So
there?
that's probably.
I think-
That's,
That's
yeah,
it
there were
then.
there were two people
Yes.
that were added after the fact.
Okay, so that's the
Actually, by
change.
the BOS.
Right.
But I think that's part of where it is, that sometimes,
yeah.
did they go into ambulance or they go into fire? But
Fire.
there were two bodies, I saw on a spreadsheet somewhere,
Yeah.
that were kind of added after the fact, and that would affect these numbers.
So it isn't comparing the same to the
No.
same, we have two more employees.
Yeah.
Right.
Correct.
And if you look at the 2021 actual expense on the EMS budget full-time, it's underspent by $91,000.
Yeah,
So I think you're just seeing
It in there and it was.
correct. And it
people,
is-
we didn't call this person EMS. You know, somebody came, somebody went, and they didn't get flagged to the correct account.
Okay, I know I have the EMS in here somewhere.
So we should probably look at the two things added together, compare totals.
Yeah, because I think, yeah, the EMS went down for the proposed 2022
Right.
salary. And I think that's, you know, and I'm guessing that makes up the difference that went over to the fire side.
So,
Well, I have to say, I appreciate getting it organized so it's in the right slot. It doesn't help us very much with trending.
Right.
right,
Exactly.
and it's been hard, this year's a learning curve for us, Lori, we're looking at a different format here.
Yeah, but as Mike pointed out on the ambulance sheet, which is revolving fund 8, 2021, it was budgeted 266,320 for their full-time salaries. And the budget for 2022 is estimated at 158,700, so it's much lower. So that probably does explain the difference.
Yep.
Why there's more in the general fund.
I'd like to ask a question.
Sure.
I'm new to this budget process here, and I realize that the EMS service, as being a permanent town department now, is kind of new. So how do you go about putting together a budget for something that's new?
Well, they've had it for almost 2 years now as a pilot program, so they do have some already knowledge and history of the vehicles, the purchases, the equipment for replacing and maintenance and what have you. They've got an idea of the manpower needs that are, or personnel needs, not manpower, that needs are there. And so they've got while it's new, it's been running as a pilot program, so there is some historical data to look at and to compare. in reference to making it part of the general fund versus a revolving fund. So when you say new, it's not like you're starting it today, so.
Well, I understand that, but it's relatively new, and
Yeah, I'm looking at the new one.
I've been around budget processes for a while.
Yeah, or even, as they alluded to, in terms of getting things in the right category when the bill comes in, or getting it reported to the office correctly so that.
Yeah, that's a never-ending battle.
Well, right, but I mean, but you need to get some gut feeling for it that you're
Yeah.
doing it right.
Yeah.
Things aren't, you know, and if you have any overtime or whatever, that's accounted for correctly, and if you have any outside funds come in, whether the funds are reported or outside funds or offsetting entries.
How did this, you were in the paper, receiving all of this stuff from Hopkinton, from Tukuk, I guess. How does that enter into your budget?
Oh, it's just me, he's helping me.
Yeah, just trying to
I'm
find-
distracted. I
So,
can't
you
find
know,
the EMS on here.
It's on the back, it's 084215.
It's not part of the general fund, so it's one of those other sheets.
It's one of the
I
back
have.
sheets.
Oh,
Okay,
okay, and
okay.
that one right there.
Yeah.
So the question about the Hawkinton equipment that we've gotten,
It's an 084215 number.
Okay.
that's a
go ahead.
blow up of it if you want to
Okay,
look at it.
okay.
I think the question was, how do I account for that in the budget moving forward? Was that the question?
Well, sorry, what impact does it have on the budget?
I think right now the biggest impact that it has on my budget is probably going to be from a training standpoint going into next year, of getting a couple different training classes or sessions for the individuals to operate that equipment. The rest of it, we're bringing it underneath Primex for the umbrella of the insurance, where they cover the cost of it and stuff, just to insure the vehicles. And then maintenance of the vehicles and the equipment will also be another expense, but it's been very well maintained. It's actually in some of the best shape of any equipment that I've ever seen. That's several years old. They took extremely good care of it. I don't anticipate to have a high cost of maintenance with that equipment. As a matter of fact, one of the things I looked at in my budget, and as we get into it and stuff, on my explanation page, I had left a blank space and I never took it out, that there was a placeholder for an increase for some of my maintenance items. But I think with the equipment that I have coming in and where I am right now, I didn't need an increase in my maintenance budget, because I believe I'm going to be able to maintain the equipment I have with the current budget that's in place.
So with that equipment, it seems like the EMS service is being like expanded. So you have ATV and you have a boat and in that, and I think I'm wondering, I think we were just trying to transition from having a contracted service for ambulance and not incorporate other types of rescue situations. And that led me to the question, we have mutual aid, but we also have other agencies around here, and I didn't know if there was like a pecking order, like if you called 911, who do they alert first? Now, does Game and Wildlife, or whatever it's called?
Fishing game.
Fishing
game,
game? Do they go out on the lakes, or who does the rescues up in the mountains? And is that what you're trying to now incorporate in by receiving some of this equipment? I just want to see how expanded you are, because I think we were just, assuming it was going to be ambulance service. Am I asking a wrong question here?
It's a really good question. I think there's two. The ambulance is separate from that rescue division, if you will. Even with a contracted ambulance service, they won't perform those rescues, like to go and hike up on trails or to go out onto the lake, unless if there's a boat there for them to actually go on. This equipment was kind of brought to us. It's something that the fire department kind of already under the umbrella was it was their responsibility to be doing it. It should have been our job all along. And there was an example where prior to me being here, there was a overdose that took place somewhere in the Moore Reservoir area, where there was an air mattress that was used to bring a patient in the middle of the night back across the waterway, which puts, an air mattress is not a flotation device, it's not a boat. Those are the type of things that occurred that firefighters and police officers were kind of doing to get the job done. The problem is it puts everybody at risk doing that. So these calls that we're speaking of with, if you will, trail rescues and water rescues, they're very few calls that occur throughout the year, but they're very high intensity and high training calls that are required, where you need the specific equipment to be able to do it. And that's where this donation kind of helped, because it saves from having to plan for that in the future, because we already have it in place, if you will. So it's not necessarily the EMS division, because we would still be doing those, even if the ambulance wasn't here. That would be part of what we did for that rescue. Getting into the pecking order that you speak of with Fish and Game and Marine Patrol for a 911 call, prior to us having any access to the lake with a boat, Marine Patrol would get the phone call first just to say, this is what's going on and stuff. We would get notified, but we'd be more at the shoreline waiting to commandeer a boat or do something to get out on the lake. Now, it'll probably be one of those things, as Marine Patrol is getting notified, we'll also get notified of the emergency. Same thing with Fish and Game. They're responsible, if you will, they have the jurisdiction in the mountains, and you can feel free because you have a little more experience with them than I do. And we have the Penny Valley Rescue Team. That's a volunteer organization that'll go down into Franconia and out onto some of the trails out there. This equipment that's here is more, it can augment that to help move rescuers about. And for us, one of the big reasons that my understanding was that we sought out that equipment, if you will, was with the snowmobile trail and the walking trails that they have, is to be able to get out to those a little bit quicker and be able to get personnel and equipment out there. And same thing with like Parker Mountain with the bicycle trails that are up there, the mountain biking trails, where there's been a big increase in the last 2 years with people using those facilities.
Okay, a follow-up, any follow-up on that before I follow up?
Well, I have a few questions, but go ahead, Dave.
Well, just to follow up on that, so we're mutual aid.
Mm-hmm.
And so if another community calls us for that mutual aid, because now we have the boat and now we have the different things. And I know it's a fine line here. You want to help people and rescue, but you also have to look at what the taxpayer is also paying. And I think we were probably just considering ambulance service, basically, to begin with. But, so if mutual aid and we go out and we provide those services, I don't understand mutual aid, I guess. Do they share in the cost? Because now you will have to man the fire station someplace else, right? Technically.
It comes out of his budget.
Correct.
If he sends 10 people to Lisbon, the town of Littleton pays for those 10 people from the time they leave to the time they get back.
And then 2 more at the fire station. Because you have to be covered.
Not necessarily. Sometimes we have other agencies. It's a coordinated attack. So yes, our employees are paid by us without question. But if Lisbon calls and says, we need everybody you got, when we all go down there, then, for example, Whitefield sends an engine to the Littleton station to stand by there. So it doesn't necessarily mean that there's more people at the station. There may or there may not be, though.
Well, I guess I'm considering all of these extra services beyond fire and beyond, the ambulance service. And I'm wondering, if we cover that service for another community, we're essentially now on the hook for, aren't we? I mean, for the employee cost?
Yeah,
Are you following me? Do you want to pick up on this?
I mean, isn't there a determination that needs to be made in terms of what services are added to mutual aid? Because didn't we have a situation a few years ago where we had a forest fire or a brush fire that we called in mutual aid and then found out we had to pay the other towns back for it because fighting brush fires or forest fires is not part of mutual aid?
That falls on the Division of Forest and Lands for the state of New Hampshire. So the Division of Forest and Lands kind of manages that a little bit different than, if you will, the traditional fire district that we fall into for Littleton. So, depending on what services you use, there potentially could be a fee there, especially if you're dealing with any of the White Mountain forests and stuff that you encroach upon. So from a mutual aid standpoint, it's kind of one of those things, is an understanding if somebody calls, we respond. And I'll use the example of the ambulance just because it's a pretty basic thing to talk about. If the ambulance is called mutual aid, we'll call somebody else in mutual aid. It's kind of like a back and forth type of thing. And the idea is when it's beyond the capabilities of what you can normally handle, as opposed to if we start doing daily calls to other communities, it's no longer mutual aid. We're actually covering their calls for them. That was, as the fire chief, that would then, if you will, incline me to have a conversation with the Board of Selectmen, the fire chief from the other community, and hopefully the select board from that community as well, and maybe even the town manager, to say that we're at a point where we're financing your emergency services, and we can't keep doing that. So we need to look at some type of a fee-based structure or some type of a per-call structure that comes in that we get reimbursed for that to cover the costs of the Littleton crews that are going.
Is even is there two existing relationships we have with ambulances with Sugar Hill and Easton, is that right? Or-
Yes, so we have contract services
Yeah.
with,
I mean, those numbers, as I remember, kind of struck me as being quite low.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, somebody had a question on that where they were curious where that formula came from. And it was a really good question because it's one that I've kind of tried to figure out. And my understanding from working backwards and going through Chad, the previous administration and stuff like that, these seem to be numbers that were there. And I'm going to back up to the days of when Ross Ambulance was doing it. And they just kind of stuck, and I'm not sure they've ever been changed.
I know Calix had some sort of valuation to come up with the numbers, and I can tell you, I don't know how they came up with those numbers, but they did. And when the next contractor came in, it was, a 30-day type of thing. We're just gonna keep the numbers the same. We came in, it was another 30-day type of thing, and the numbers kind of stayed the same.
Yeah, well, what are those two numbers? Currently?
And what are they paying?
That's, if you will, that's the fee for 911 service for us to send the ambulance for an emergency call in those communities. And I think the two of them together total right around $30,000.
Just on the face of it, knowing the numbers that we're facing, the community could get ambulance service for $30,000,
That's great.
that's a drop in the bucket.
Well,
Yeah.
I think what I'm hearing, we're gonna have a recommendation at the very end it's just like every other department, we ask them to look at their fee structure. And I think we would probably ask that to be considered.
Well, if we go back to, who's the gentleman who did the study, Duggan or Dugan?
Brian
Brian.
Duggan from
Remember,
MRI.
he joked with us, Diane, he said he'd done like 20 of these studies, and 19 of them cried out for regionalization, and one and a half actually happened. But, I mean, based on his experience on doing all of these, I mean, that when he looks at them, that every one of these should be a regional program to start with. It shouldn't be, there's mutual aid, that it's way beyond that. It should be, these are the towns that are involved, this is the cost of the system, and this is how many stations we're gonna have, and then whether you divvy it up based on population or road miles, whatever. But no, whatever, if it's population, you divvy it up on it, and that's what it is. Because at some point, he says the mutual aid just becomes unbalanced.
You're absolutely right, and those fee structures come into a combination of, and there's a couple different ways to do it on a regional basis, between population and actual call volume, and depending on how that factors in, and looking at two different ways that you charge everybody, if you will, and everybody pays into that district. But it's a great point, and it's something that I think in this area would work very well. I'm just not sure how quickly other departments will go into it. But that's something, as a matter of fact, one of the questions on here was kind of about recruitment and retention for call firefighters. And we have that as a nationwide problem, and especially up here, we've been in contact with our neighboring departments just to say, how do we improve that recruitment and retention program on a regional basis of doing something together where we're all kind of moving forward? And I've introduced the idea of, doing the same thing with purchasing. We have more power with purchasing if we're doing it as a group. If we're all using the same equipment, the same, if you will, heart monitors, buying the same ambulances or the same, fire gear. If we're doing it as a bigger group, we get a bigger discount, and we have, it saves everybody across the board money when it comes to the taxpayer. So it's a great point, and it's something we're talking about. I just don't know where that's gonna fall as we move forward, but.
Well, I think that it probably has to be sooner than later because we are establishing this now, and I think people get comfortable, and the other communities would get comfortable with that fee structure, and I don't think that
Yep.
isn't fair to Littleton taxpayer.
I have two
If you could get
thoughts.
service for $30,000, why would you ever have a conversation?
Right.
Yeah. John, do you want to go ahead?
Well, yeah, I think transparency between towns is a must if you're gonna do this. And that's probably difficult to achieve, but I like the direction. That was one of my questions. So, since we're taking on more expense with this, which we really are, and you mentioned the staffing and the training and the equipment maintenance, which is in good shape now, but it won't always be.
Correct.
And then there's registration of vehicles and, and insurance and all of that sort of thing too, which adds to the
Housing.
budget. So, I think, I can tell you, my druthers would not have been to absorb it at this juncture. And I'm John Goodrich, I talked to you
Yes,
before
yes, you
on the
did. Yep.
phone, so I'm not pulling
Nope.
the rug out from under you at all. But anyway, it's done. But part of the question I have is how are we going to generate offsetting revenues? One of the questions I hear is that we aren't able to transport patients to hospitals like Hanover, or because of the licensing structure of ambulance services. And Lancaster has to do it.
When it's going from a facility to a facility, it's no longer considered a 911 service, and that requires, if you will, a transfer license with additional trainings and certifications that go with those so that your paramedics are able to actually do that. One of the things we're actually doing here with Littleton Regional Hospital is working on a protocol, so if we have somebody that's having a heart attack that needs to be at one of the cath labs, whether it's Concord Hospital or Dartmouth, that we can bypass Littleton Regional Hospital and transport directly to that hospital for that patient. Where we're at right now is we're not at a point where we can do that transfer service, where if it's a patient that walks in or arrives in a different way to Littleton Hospital, that we can't take them from the ER and bring them down to one of those facilities.
Is it a matter of just having the proper licensing, or is it a matter of getting approval from an agency?
It's kind of both, if you want to.
I think there's I have a couple thoughts. I've run a transfer EMS service, a very successful one. You have to come at it with the right mindset. And the mindset for me was always about taking care of people. Yes, ambulances and personnel are expensive. Highly qualified people are expensive. You don't want the cheapest, lowest paid doctor working on you. Everybody wants the best. So you gotta make money in order to be able to afford that. And so I think you first would want to stop and try to define what we want to do and why are we trying to do it. If we're gonna
I would just say we should do that before we buy things and bring them in, but go ahead.
Well, no, and we'll come at it from a little bit different perspective, but you're talking about a pretty substantial growth of the organization because it's going to require more people, more stuff to do more.
Right.
There is a certain efficiency of scale. You know, I mean, it's not like you need 7 ambulances or something like that, but there is some efficiencies that are gained, but in smaller systems like in northern New England, you don't really get to squeeze out the efficiency that you do out of systems where you can in 30 minutes be at 12 different hospitals. So you'd have to sit here and say, what are we trying to accomplish? What's our goal? Is our goal to care for the residents of Littleton by providing an ambulance service regardless of the type of service they need, i.e. either 911 or interfacility transfer? And what costs are acceptable to complete that mission based off of what we could expect to find from revenue? Because if it becomes more like a money-making pursuit, it's really difficult to find the employees that bring that passion forward, that are willing to do anything necessary to take care of you, because the values are all off. And again, I'm not discounting the need for offsetting revenue.
I
I've run
kind of
those
agree with
systems.
that, to be honest.
So
about
it's,
that.
you know, so it's, we have to, I think that's the place to start if we want to do this. How do we want to do that? What service do we want to provide? How much is that going to cost? How much do we expect to make? And do those scales work well enough that it's a venture worth exploring? Or
Shouldn't that
Is
have
it-
been done before we made a decision?
well,
Well,
you're talking about an expansion of the service.
I'm asking the board,
Well, can
members here.
address,
That should have
but we
been-
haven't gotten into the transfer business.
Right.
So we're not in the transfer
Which we
business.
shouldn't be.
And I'm not gonna say I disagree, I don't disagree with you. That
This is a
before-
losing proposition.
Before you go into transfer business, you need to analyze exactly what your risks are,
Right, but this
what
is
you've
a
talked
losing-
about, because
This ambulance.
the people
is
you're
a
picking up in the
losing
ambulance are the
proposition.
same people you're transferring. So if they're already uninsured, then there's no money coming from the transfer. So I know a lot of people say there's all this money to be made in transfers, like somehow these people got deep pockets. It's no different. It's the same Medicare patient, the same Medicaid patient.
And the same taxpayers are still gonna pay the bill.
Yes, yes. And
How
so
does Lancaster afford that?
they've made that their business model.
Well, I think
Yeah,
that
that
they've,
doesn't tell me how they afford it.
so
They have a much different labor cost.
they've changed their labor structure. And I think that if we really want to get into that, it's worth taking a trip there or having them come here and discuss how their labor costs are. When you said their labor costs, they're paying $50 an hour for paramedics. Last I knew, we discussed how that worked. That's how much you get paid to go on a transfer. But I wanted to
But I
back
think-
up because it's
I
not.
think that's how he compensates his people, is by paying them on the transfers. And that's how they're able to give their donated time as a call company locally.
They've had to change that model, and I think that they could best describe why. But I wanted to back up to something, if I may, because it's not. I've been here for a little while now, and I don't want something lost, and it's something that you guys wouldn't necessarily know. But Littleton has been a net abuser of the mutual aid system for years. When, good, bad, or indifferent, when the fire department and other town agencies were defunded, the organization was not meeting its needs. Other departments were able to get to buildings on fire in Littleton before Littleton Fire Department was, because certain days of the week we didn't have staffing. And for other departments, they should have been calling the town and saying, this is unacceptable. You can't even meet your own obligations. And so we do have some goodwill that we need to dole out. When we took on EMS with a 28-day notice, Whitefield basically donated one of their ambulances to us for 2 months to use. And so costs are very important, and I want to do everything I can to offset those or to reduce them. But at the same time, it's hard for me now to pick up the phone to Whitefield and be like, hey, I know you need our UTV, but I'm going to have to send you a bill. Because just 2 short years ago, they only had 2 ambulances, they gave us one and said, you just let us know when you're all set with it and we'll come pick it up. So as a municipality, we have some goodwill to pay back.
Yeah, but as far as structure fires, Chad, we haven't had enough structure fires to talk about fire mutual aid to Littleton in 10 years. have we?
I would strongly disagree with that. We've had a couple fires that were very successful because of our current staffing model in mutual aid system. Two actually, but one in specifically at the industrial park with a larger employer at the industrial park who had a dust collection system catch on fire. That was pretty tricky given the design of the building, the materials in the building, and the fire itself.
Was it an indoor dust collector or an outdoor?
It's a combination.
Combination, yeah.
You know, that's part of what our role is. That was a 4-alarm fire, and during that fire, our ambulance was still staffed, and we ran 2 medical calls with Littleton staff on those ambulances. So mutual aid is a big part. I would say now we're doing our fair share of it, where in the past we really weren't.
Can I?
So I got another question.
Sure.
You know,
Both of
so
us are.
Quality, when the decision was made, I guess the select board decided it was still worth it to do it. And I disagree, but that's okay. Quality, it was always cited the quality would be better than it is now, than it was with the contracted service. And so my question is, how are you measuring quality? How are you going to keep track of it, and what's the basis against which you measure, so that you're sure you're really holding the service accountable for good quality?
Well, my guys get all kinds of annoying messages from me about the simplest little things, so they would tell you that, and that's because I personally read every report of every call written in the department, and we have others that look at it all as well. So, talking about quality in comparison to others is really challenging, and I'd refer you to the MRI management letter that was written in the period where we were negotiating, or the town was attempting to negotiate with another contractor, because I think that is language that's public and it's been vetted and has been accepted. So how do we measure quality? Well, there's back early on with our EMS commission, we established some key performance indicators, and they're based off of national standards. I only brought a few copies.
Can you send this document to us via digital, an email? Can you do that?
I can send it to somebody that can send it to you. I don't know that I have your email, but I'll get it. We can
Yeah, we can get it to you.
I don't have everybody's email, so
Send it to Vicki, and she'll send it out to us. Okay.
So these are based off of national standards. Some of the national standards didn't make sense for us. Like a key performance indicator is like some quality in pediatric cardiac arrests.
Yeah.
All right, we really don't have them, thank God. So we pared back some of those quality indicators because they were just going to be a little bit of static, because for us there were maybe a once a year call or something like that, and we focused on some of these other ones like a STEMI and stroke, and this is part of what I do is I read through those reports and I look at those calls. Was aspirin administered within 10 minutes? Was an EKG administered within 10 minutes for suspected acute coronary care calls? Were unresponsive patients, was their blood glucose assessed?
So I played right into your hand here by asking this question.
No, I think I appreciate the question.
These are really good questions, because most people aren't aware that goes on, that this type of quality is done. And the same thing, and this goes another level, where the medical control board, or the facility that we have with Littleton, one of their doctors actually sits on this to actually review these calls as well, and to have oversight with it. And it's also required by the New Hampshire Bureau of EMS for us to have this. And they also get some of these results as well, so that they know that, the quality is being measured. And we work hand in hand with them too, because they're the ones that do the licensing with us and stuff, and, we actually have a very good relationship with them to be able to ask questions and kind of, deal with issues come up type of thing. So, but they're great questions, because that's the only way you're gonna find out how we actually do this, is to ask.
Well, I applaud you for that. I think that's a good thing.
We take it seriously.
I can see that.
We do, no, and I told Chief, like, who was it that asked a quality question? Because this is the budget committee, and like,
I'm an old manufacturing guy, so I'm used to what.
Yeah.
You gotta measure quality.
And the reason, like, when I said, like, my guys get emails from me, it's not because they didn't give aspirin in 10 minutes. The reporting systems are very complex. It's not just kind of going in and writing a little thing in Word. That's not the report. If you started an IV, there's a tool that you enter that in that asks a lot of different questions. And so we look at that through report writing systems. And so if something, if a little piece of that's missed, which on the touch screens, it happens on occasion. You know, they'll get an email from me like, hey, can you go back and fill in where that site was exactly on this run call? Because I want to be able to tell you how many IVs we've started in the right AC, which is required by stroke protocol, which is opposite of the side that we normally do.
So I have one more question, then
Go
I'll
ahead.
stop.
No, I hope not.
Yes, very
And
good.
it's probably for you selectmen, actually, but,
Then you can't ask it.
They're just here to listen, right?
really what we're doing is we're putting in a service in town that's more expensive than what we had. And so it's gonna require more tax dollars, no matter how you slice it in my mind. I think it's really critical to get value out of that and to make sure the value is coming back to taxpayers. I already told you I wouldn't have done it, but it's done.
So I can answer that. One of the things we looked at was the quality of service that was coming into town. Everybody's liking what they're doing. We don't like what they're spending. So by putting a 3-person advisory board out there to try to keep a handle on it for us, to let us know what's being spent, how it's being spent, which is coming in the near future right here.
That's what I was gonna ask about, that
I think that that was
3-person.
the only solution really to get through this right now.
How rigorous is their process gonna be to be sure?
We have to
it costs-
decide that, but I've got figures, and we need to sit down and discuss some stuff with, and each one of the select board's gonna bring somebody to the table.
Okay,
Um,
all right, so that's, wait
And
and
that's
see,
at the
huh?
start of getting a handle on
All right.
some of the stuff, but I'd like to get back to the question on all of the rescue equipment, because as a select board, we were notified it was all free stuff, no cost to the taxpayers. And now I'm seeing a storage trailer that's out back for $100 a month. I'm seeing all new decals. Yesterday's paper talked about training other communities to run this. All I'm seeing is cost, cost, cost. I think we're just the stem of the mushroom on this right now. Then when we get to the top, we're all gonna sit back and go, wow. Because we're gonna weigh this stuff out, and it's gonna be up to the taxpayers to replace it.
That was my question here to you guys, and I think that utility vehicle, if in the article yesterday in the Caledonia was like 1996 or something. It was pretty old and in good condition, but the point is, it's gonna age out as all of this stuff, and then what are we gonna say? Well, it was great while it lasted, but we're gonna discontinue these services because we don't want to fund this equipment, or are we going to just kind of ease it into the budget and for replacement? And again, that's a whole large expense that you're talking about, and we might have some duplicate or overlap from other agencies at the state level or at the county level that can do some of these services that you had pointed out. So
Right.
I think it's a carrot that's being dangled in front of us with this free stuff, but like you say, it's the mushrooms about to come further, so we have to be careful here.
Yep.
I think the other thing too, about just going back to where's the pecking order, or what agency covers a call? Do we truly understand that? Do we have an agreement with the other agencies? We don't understand that. You guys understand it, but we don't understand it. And, because I think what we don't want to see is all these departments showing up and only one department is really needed, or two, or one agency is needed. It's kind of like having a fire truck respond to a lot of these, a big ladder truck responding to different things. So we have that in our minds, and we're also saying, so how many towns, how many agencies are going to respond to an incident, and you only need one?
Well, to be honest with you, if we only need one, it's probably gonna be one that's responding, as opposed to, like, for an alarm activation in Littleton Fire will respond to that. For someone reporting their house is on fire, to kind of meet the standards, we probably have 4 departments that initially will start to that, and if it's not a fire, then we'll cancel them. That way, it's that early detection, early response, and having the manpower on scene quickly to make a difference. The same thing applies to when you get into some of these rescue situations, like with a water rescue.
That's what I'm talking
Yep.
about more than
Yep.
anything.
The water rescue, for somebody that is drowning out in Moore Reservoir or Partridge Lake, we probably have probably two or three departments that are initially responding to that until we find out what's going on and stuff. Because if they go under and we start a rescue operation to start trying to find them, we have a very short window of time to actually get them before it's becoming a recovery, and it's going to require a dive team to go in to get them. As opposed to if we get there and somebody has been rescued and they've been pulled out of the water, we no longer need the water rescue aspect of the call anymore, because now it's kind of switched to that medical call portion where they've either taken in the water and they're breathing and we can treat them, or we have to do CPR.
But a dive team, so you said a dive team.
Mhm.
So.
Fish and game.
Fish and game,
Yep,
okay, that's,
the dive team at that point, it becomes what we call recovery, and you'll hear that in the news where, when they talk about rescue versus recovery, it's kind of getting into that determination of how long have they been in the water for, and what's the real, likelihood that we're going to be able to recover them and actually save them. A child has a much higher chance of surviving than an adult underwater for a longer period of time. So those are the things that factor into it. We have no interest in developing a dive team at this point because there's no need for it, and that's what Fish and Game is for.
Littleton used to have a rescuba team
Did they?
many years ago.
Yep. And that's one of those things, again, looking in the area, we have Fish and Game that can come in and do that. As opposed to if you didn't have that at the time, it's like that's where you have to find somebody to be able to do these type of things. But yeah, so that would be where I would say that, if you will, there's a line in the sand. We're not, that would be it. I'm not having my people enter the water to do a recovery like that as a scuba.
right. So, going back to mutual aid and providing a service for Sugar Hill, what is the other town that we provide?
So that's not mutual
Easton.
aid.
That is, I know, that's mutual aid.
Right.
Yep.
So that's where I think we would say that the fee structure needs to be reviewed. Because I don't want you to think that we don't want to honor mutual aids with
okay.
Diane, we
community.
need to, I think you did make a good point, that we've been a net user rather than a giver in mutual aid, so we've gotta understand that, that.
I
back
agree
and
with
forth.
that, I'm
Yep.
just saying, but that isn't a mutual aid situation.
Just mutual aid and paying for EMS service are two separate issues.
Two separate issues.
Contract at the rate
And
that
that's
they're
what I'm
paying,
trying
those
to-
two towns are paying for
Yes.
EMS.
So,
needs to
and
be like
going,
that.
just real
Yeah.
quickly, going back to what the select board had talked about with the commission that oversees EMS, any expansion, if you will, of the EMS program, being whether it's going to be transfers or it's going to be another town, that board, and this is just my view of it, it would go before that board, because what I don't want is, it makes sense, you guys talk to, Bethlehem, and they're like, oh, this is great, we want to do this. The trigger gets pulled on it, and then when we look at it, it's like, well, it's great for them, but unfortunately, it just set us back. And so again, looking at those costs and making sure we're not taking on something that is actually going to hurt the current program that we have and set us back, or be a cost driver for the community.
So to do it in a good way, we really should, I don't know if it's even doable, but we should have a meeting of all the surrounding towns with people who can reasonably talk about it and say, look, this is exploratory, but what can we do for that we mutually gain collectively, and not one person pays, one town pays and the others give or receive. So you want it, it's gotta be transparent and fair, but you gotta get all of those people at the same table.
So I had two things that I said, and I said the one. The second thing, I've negotiated these types of contracts before, and I think if you want my professional opinion on this, it's well within your rights, and you'd be well served to recommend to the board that they take a look at these contracts. I caution you to at this level, beginning to discuss how those contracts should be structured and managed, because this is those negotiations take place between boards, and you have to have all of the facts in front of you before you go ahead and you talk about a way to structure any of these types of contracts, and they can get they can get a little bit tricky. And so I would just say, the board's well served to recommend this board is well served to have the Board of Selectmen look at it, but to not get into the details as to how they should be structured.
Right.
To John's point though, every community is having a challenge to some degree. And openness and fairness and receptiveness is important. You need to kick over the stones and find out where the snakes are or whatever. And you know, and if you go through that process, then hopefully some people will say, geez, well, you know, maybe this wouldn't, I mean, you want to ultimately be fair in doing it, and you want to be able to deliver the service, the quality of service that you say that you can. But, I mean, I know that every community is having issues with, you know, getting personnel, and most of them have been doing it for years on a volunteer basis. Well, you're getting those volunteer firemen and EMS, and as you increase the qualifications necessary and the amount of training that's required, I mean, you know, even as simple as, you know, youth sports or whatever, you know, you become a baseball referee or a basketball referee has become much more difficult, and now all those that's why you see so many old guys running around the basketball courts, is because you guys can't retire. We haven't got anybody to replace you. So I mean, there is a genuine broad-based need, but somebody needs to start that conversation and get it going. But if you don't start, you know, and I don't think that really it should be happening on a, you know, 1-to-1, Littleton to Sugar Hill, Littleton to Easton, Littleton to Franklin.
Yeah, that's my point, Steve.
I think it needs to be, you know, everybody's got to get there together. And okay, guys, what problems do you have? You have them submit a list ahead of time. What are your pluses? What are your minuses? What are your challenges? And then see if there's a common, you know, thing that puts it all together.
One of the challenges in that grouping would be the towns that are out on the fringe, on the edge, might not have as strong a mutual need with Littleton as the one that's on the next town for them, outside of that perimeter too. So that's a challenge as well.
Yeah, but you need to have that discussion
Yep.
and find out where you're starting.
Yeah.
Well, I also think that kicking over the rocks and stones and finding what snakes and all that really applies to what the EMS service has gone through in establishing this. I mean, we had a limited view of what it was going to entail when we first started going down this road, and what kind of equipment we're going to need, and all the, you know, the kind of coverage that we needed. So you're finding out more on what is needed, and you have to educate us, and that's what we're asking here tonight. So we're not making any types of comments that are disparaging, I hope.
Not at all.
No.
So anyways, that's my one thing. But looking at the capital improvement plan for next year, so I'll have to preface this question with, last year we had our meeting at the fire station, and I just kind of laughed and I said, oh, if you get any more equipment, you're going to have to build more bays. So I see in the capital improvement plan, $1.6 million.
Yep.
So I don't know if it's bays or if it's other stuff.
Well,
You, Diane?
and here's my caveat to that, is in there based on and you guys will probably know more than I do, because I looked at the plan. I want to say it was 10 years ago. There was a plan that was put together, a capital improvement plan. And in there was a station improvement for $1.2 million. And I want to say the paperwork that I was looking at, it was spread out over a period of time of like, and I don't remember how much, it was like $200,000 a year to pay for it. I can't find it. I don't know what it was. And I took that, and I want to say the last payment, and that was like 2015, and I kind of extrapolated that out with the inflation for costs of construction materials. And what I'm looking at is the inside between, you know, the offices, the HVAC systems and stuff like that. I'm assuming that was the station renovation. So I put that in there kind of as a placeholder as I look at this, because I'm not sure what was looked at for a plan or what was there. And that's kind of where that number came from. So it's not 100%, it's just that's how I came to it, and I don't know what it entailed.
All right, any other?
I have a question. Please don't misinterpret the question, but the EMS service that was contracted for, they were given a specific scope of responsibility, duty, is that correct?
You know, I'm sure the contract kind of defined that to a degree. I'm trying to recall, but it was basically to provide transport EMS services, basically roadside ambulance.
Okay, so now, the service we have that was to take the place of that, looks like it has gotten a lot bigger.
How so?
We're talking about water rescues, we're talking
Oh,
about
okay.
all that kind of
Well-
thing. And it's
Yeah,
outside of the, what
The
I
scope.
recall as
Yeah.
being the scope that was assigned to the contractor
Yeah.
that you were replacing.
I would agree with you on that.
Yeah.
So what you're seeing is that this kind of, this equipment has come in at the same time as we've been doing this EMS pilot project for the last 2 years. We used to have a boat. It rotted and fell apart. It was a Zodiac, it was 20 years old, it was rubber, and we didn't have a capital program in place at the fire station to replace the boat. It went away. We used to have a forestry truck. Same type of thing. It wore out and wasn't replaced and went away. And so what you're seeing with some of this is we should have a boat based off of some of the target hazards we have here in Littleton. And fortunately, an organization donated one to us. That's not connected to the EMS system necessarily. It's connected to what we do as a fire rescue department.
So, to budget numbers now, I got a question.
Okay,
So,
please.
So I took 2021 estimated expense, and then I took the 2022 estimated expense and added the fire and the ambulance service together, just to see what the comparison is, and I get $1,895,000 in 21, and I get $1,998,000 in 22. So that's about a 5% increase. So my question is that fair? Is that a reasonable amount? And is it, can you manage with that? And even can you do better if possible? But that's kind of my question. So it looks to me like it's 5%, 5.05 or so, just doing it in my head.
Just following the
And
numbers.
that's without
John, where are you getting the
Without
5%?
contracted?
Just doing the math.
I took 21 for two
Which
departments.
math?
I added fire and I added ambulance together in 21, and I got a total of 1895. And then I added the same two together in 22, and I got 1998.
So a couple
You're
of things.
taking 2021 estimated expense?
I took 21 estimated expense,
Okay.
and then 22 estimated expense.
And Lori has something to add to
Yeah,
that.
a couple of things on that, it's just that, health insurance rates went up 12.6%.
Yeah, that's what I want to hear.
How much was that, Lori?
12.6%. So that's a big part of it, and the other part was the 3 additional people that weren't actually budgeted in 21, but
Okay.
they were voted in after the budgets were set. So that would
So
explain why.
12.6 on insurance,
Higher.
and then,
What about
Three bodies
retirement?
are there that weren't
Yeah.
there, and
Yeah.
what's the total staffing, fire and ambulance now?
Total together is 12.
Okay. And separately, fire, do you separate them that much, or do you meld them?
We have been separating it, so it was 9 to the fire department, 3 to the ambulance, if you will. And I'm not sure if we're still moving forward, if we're merging that into one fire budget, or?
well, I mean, what we did is when the pilot was set up in the town vote, it was a revolving fund, where revenue comes in and expense. To change it to make EMS part of the general fund budget will require a vote in March to kind of undo the revolving fund and then move it into the general fund. And from a tracking standpoint, it's going to be a lot easier when you're looking at future numbers, because you're going to see all that built in, because then he's not identifying a person specifically. It doesn't matter the body, they're trained to be on either vehicle, and we don't have to worry about
Okay.
in
that's
terms
good.
of there. I mean, and so
Yeah.
from a cost standpoint, you'll get a total cost of what it is involving fire, EMS, public safety.
Yeah. So I was just trying to look at where we are together versus,
But-
going ahead.
But again, the two contracts that you're negotiating?
For
this year?
fire.
Right, so what you're adding up together does not
Isn't the whole
include, isn't
thing.
the whole
Yeah.
thing.
What do we need to add in on top?
A new negotiated contract,
Yeah.
but it's frozen. This is my interpretation. What you have proposed for 2022 is what they received in salaries in 2021. They can't, so they negotiate a contract, it could be a 3% increase, but it's also a step usually and an increase, maybe an additional. That step isn't even included in there because until the taxpayers approve a new contract, they can't even move on step.
Yeah.
And that's the same way it is for
So
the
we have
school.
we have more growth than 5%.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
And so how much is the retirement going up by? What's the percentage? So that's
retirement is like 33%.
33%?
Increase or no?
Not, what's the
No,
increase?
No, 33 cents on the dollar, right?
She's asking the increase.
Yeah.
Yeah, what's the
Yeah.
percentage increase?
I think we're going something like from 28 to 33, if I remember
Yes.
correctly.
Like a 5% increase on that? Okay.
Well, it's more
On
than
the
It's
five.
more than 20, that's more than,
More than 5%, it's 5 cents on a third, so it's more than
that's like
15.
20, 20
15%,
something.
15%.
Yeah,
Well,
15?
yeah,
15 to
18,
20.
17.
18, okay. You guys figure it out and get back to me.
But
So that's, you have to include,
Yeah.
okay?
Yeah.
So,
can I
sure.
Yes, but where John was coming with his numbers, I mean, so if, and the difference between on the fire department calling it the 2021 budget as opposed to on the 2022 or 2021 ambulance calling it the estimated expense, the reason for the two different terms, that have to do with that revolving fund designation?
Yep, because the revolving fund doesn't operate on a budget, it
Yeah.
just operates on
Okay.
estimated revenues and
Because
expenses.
obviously on the fire side, and this probably has to do with your new hires, but I mean, the fire department budget basically is showing a 20% increase, on just the fire department side. Right, from 1208 to 1,443,000. So that's 20% there, so I mean, and so between that, we're gonna be spending, well, obviously approaching somewhere around $2 million. But I guess, so do we have a sense, in trying to figure out here where your revenue stream is coming, for every dollar that the ambulance bills out, what are we collecting for every dollar?
23 cents.
23 cents.
But I'll tell you that's not a great question, because only because we could bill whatever we want. One of our previous contractors billed almost nothing. And they didn't have the opportunity to collect more from some of the insurances. So, I understand the kind of the premise of the question, but as far as healthcare finance goes, it's not a great question.
Well, you have to have a question, Judge, you never get an answer. Okay,
No, I understand what he's saying.
but-
It's a
but I mean,
complicated
you
formula
need-
on how they do the
You need
billing.
to
but we're-
conceptualize.
Yeah, but we,
what you're doing, and whatever that reasonable, usual customer, whatever it is, you need to have some type of baseline. If you don't have that, you're freaking 4 sheets to the wind. So you need to have a point of size. So we all knew it was gonna be low. Okay, so reality is whatever it is, 23 cents. So, and then however you bring, when do you bring in the revenue? When it's actually received?
Correct.
Or are you putting in a placemaker somewhere along the way that you think if you build out, a period of time that you build out $100,000, are you putting in a $23,000 expected receivable? Are you putting in nothing? What are you doing?
So on this sheet that we sent out, this is the data on the monthly breakout.
File them here, I don't know if everyone has them.
Oh, sorry about that, maybe they didn't make it all the way around.
John,
So, yes,
No one was here when I got passed around, so it stopped at this spot.
thank you.
I apologize if the way I said didn't come off the right way. I enjoy I'm one of the few geeks that actually enjoys the budget process and the finance end of things. I really do. I have a lot of success in that. I think you've heard about some of that. But this is the breakdown, and I can kind of tell you why. Some months it looks outrageous, and other months it doesn't.
First thing you have to explain though is what those numbers actually mean. What is a bill, what's a credit, and what's an
So
adjustment?
the bill is whatever the total amount we sent out that month for bills.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna use fake actual amounts because it's a little bit easier. For example, let's just say we bill $1,000 for each ambulance.
Well, let's just start with
transport.
February 2020. You billed out $90,000.
Correct.
Okay. What's the 7394?
That's what we actually received in revenue. We got $7,394 in checks or cash that month.
Of what was billed in February or came in February from what was billed February and previous?
Everything previous. That month and previous. It's
That month.
rolling. Yeah.
Okay, all right, so, okay.
Yep.
And
That's why you don't
What
see-
is the adjustment?
The adjustment is one of a couple things. It is either what is called a contractual obligation. So we have contracts with Medicare and Medicaid. This is where I'll use some of those numbers. Like if we bill $1,000 for an ambulance transport because we feel in Littleton, that's what it costs to provide that in that moment. Medicare says, that's great, Littleton, I'm only paying you $100 though, because you're required by law to provide this service. Medicare says, that's great, Littleton, I'm gonna pay you $500 because you're required by law to provide that rate to us at that amount. And private insurance will say, how about we just pay you 50% of what you billed, will that work okay for you? So even though we provide the same service to each resident, their payers through contracts in healthcare determine what they actually pay. And that's why that question about how much do we collect on what we build isn't a great question, because we could bill $1 million per call.
Wow.
And they would still say, no, we're not paying that, we're paying this amount.
Well, I
The
mean-
reason why it's important to try to identify what you actually think it costs to deliver that service in that moment is because we have to defend that with Medicare. And it's a complicated process. And
So is the adjustment, is that always a negative figure?
Yeah.
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 That's okay. That's
Nobody's
a-
ever paying you more.
So the total of adjustments are far larger than the total of the credits.
correct,
Ideally, your credits and your adjustments add up to your billing.
they don't always with
But
us.
ideally, that's what you're shooting for. It's
Yeah.
essentially the insurance said, yeah, you billed 1,000, but customary for this is 700. So we're going to adjust that $300 down, and we should be able to get a credit for the 700.
Okay, but the reason they don't add up,
Correct.
part of it is because of the lag time?
That's at least part of it, yeah.
Part of it, right. But, and there again, not to be making more work, but obviously it would be nice to have it two ways. It'd be nice to know all the bills. Now, this is okay for, I guess, cash flow or however you want to look at it, but it would be nice to know in a given month for all the bills that were sent out in February of 2020, what was actually collected. I know, Jim, you're saying 23% is what it
Yeah,
is.
I mean,
on-
yeah,
on
just based on the
average.
report, it's
But
23.
because this here is actual billing for a month and actual receipts for a month and actual adjustments in that month, but it doesn't line up directly with the month in which.
So it doesn't necessarily even mean, so something billed in March the service could have been provided in January. And this is why,
Oh, not even billed in the month that it was.
and let me
actually-
explain to you why we might do something like this. We're not at that point yet. That would be a high-performance billing, EMS billing program. For example, a lot of insurances nowadays have a deductible, and the patient is responsible for that deductible, right? So we get that patient, and boy, we do a good job, we send out the bill the next day. Who gets that bill? We brought them to the hospital. The patient gets that bill. How reliable are they on paying their deductible? Maybe, maybe not. But you sit on that for a month or two, and you let other services that were provided to that patient send their bills. We send our bill in, the deductible's been met, And now we're just dealing directly with the insurance company who says, all right, this is what you owe. You don't get any more money because the patient hasn't met their deductible yet. They still get the discount as if the insurance is paying it themselves. So it may not be important and when it's all said and done to link the actual revenue to a specific month for those types of purposes.
Yeah, other than being, obviously it just firms up your numbers. It might say that some months were better than others, and whether that makes any difference may not.
Yeah, I can see your point to that. And in fairness, I'll ask the billing company, how easy is that of a thing to do, and if that's something they could, if it's, oh yeah, no problem, Chad, let me run that report for you, I'll get it to you. And then if it's not,
They may say we can do it, but at the end of the day, it still will make no difference.
That's what they'll say. They'll be like, they'll try to steer me away from it.
Roger, do you have a question?
No, I just wanted to tell you that this is why we couldn't make a decision on what the pilot program costs to run for a year. We couldn't get the information on exactly what it costs to run this for a year because this is the way it works.
So, there's a lot of questions here, and it's, me and the time, 5:23. I don't mind if we go further than that, but I try to keep it so you can get home for dinner. But we have more questions, and we also have, you answered questions. And do you want him to run through the questions that we submitted, and so we can get some of that information, and then follow, it may answer some of the questions that you have. John?
I have a very quick question of, in the budget, it says charges for coverage in other areas. What other areas does the EMS cover?
Yeah, I believe that's gonna be for Sugar Hill and Easton, for the communities. It's the 911 service we do there.
So they contract with us to provide an ambulance service for
So
them.
the 911 and charges for coverage for both Sugar Hill and Easton?
The 911 is the money that they've collected.
No,
Earlier.
earlier when I made mention of that, you said that was part of Sugar Hill and Easton. The 911 calls for transport.
I think you were talking transfer earlier,
No,
right?
no, this was,
Well,
this was before that.
All right, now I apologize. I guess I'm not completely understanding what the question is right now.
Just to clarify, if you're looking at this report, is that what you're looking at? Yeah. So the revenues are labeled 911 calls for transport, that's the
Got it.
revenues that, any kind of 911 calls
That-
are.
That's
basically
the
ambulance
receipts
revenue.
from patient care.
Yeah. And then charges for coverage in other areas, that is the Sugar Hill and Easton amount.
The 36,000.
Yep. Yep.
So-
Sugar Hill and Easton are not included in the 911.
Right.
That's not correct.
The patients that we transport, when we bill them, we get reimbursed for that as well. So we do, when we transport somebody from Easton or Sugar Hill, excuse me, we will submit a bill as a 911, and we'll get reimbursed for that as well. Some of them we won't, just like we do in Littleton, but they do receive a bill. And that will show up in the 911 calls for transport in that tally as well. The 36,972, if you will, that's the fee for us just to be available to respond with an ambulance to them.
Okay. So our Littleton's 2020 actual expense was 481,000 from the total expense in 2020. So to have the ambulance in Littleton cost Littleton 480,000, but to have service available to Easton cost them 36,000.
In Easton and Sugar Hill.
Easton and Sugar Hill.
Correct.
They have to pay 36,000 for that, but Littleton gets the opportunity to spend 480,000 for that. Is that
So
correct?
the 487,000
That's
is revenue.
revenue.
Expenses are up above,
Okay.
still
It's only
480,000.
480.
So 480, okay.
So it's only 7 off. Yeah, it's not a good point.
And that-
Just to make sure.
is that a true statement? I mean, I don't want to make assumptions here, but it sounds like we pay 480 for a service that they get for 37. Not to, and
So-
this gets back to the details that we probably shouldn't get into. But it feels like that number on their part should go up a little bit.
Well, that's why we were
Yeah.
saying, I would say that this committee would make a recommendation
Yeah.
to the board to look into those numbers
Okay.
and see what they,
And I'm not sure if you were here when we first started, somebody did ask that question of where the formula came from. And that was something, I asked that when I came here too, because I agree with you, it's kind of low. And as we researched it, it goes back to, if you will, before Littleton Fire was doing it with the contract and ambulance services and Ross Ambulance. That's where those fees kind of came from, but we have no idea how they determine those costs.
Okay. Then I apologize for being late, so I'm not
No,
gonna miss anyone
no.
else's time.
that's okay.
That was a fair,
Fine. All right,
Okay,
Go through
going
the-
through the list of questions, we talked about the positions we had in the budget and stuff, so I won't go over that one. How many call or volunteer members did you have on the roster in 2020 at year end? And we had 6 at that point in time. How many call firefighter members do you have as of October 31st, 2021? We have 5 at this time. Unfortunately, we did have one that passed away. Is there an active program to recruit these types of positions? At the moment, we are designing one. That was one I spoke of earlier that was kind of a regional plan that we're working with the other departments, that we would like to work with the CET program at the high school, and kind of work on it together with the area departments as well, because I think we're gonna get a bigger response on that. We did have one other call firefighter that we were bringing on board, and he's since been hired by the police department, so we've kind of lost him for a period of time. The next question I had was shift coverage by call company. It was account 420 ending in 121. Was budgeted for $20,064 as of 8/31. Spent only $1,785 of that budget. For 2022 budget, there is no money budgeted. Why is that no longer there for the coverage for the call company? Right now, I don't have any call company members that are eligible to work shift to cover. They don't want to. So that money is still there. What I did during this process, and this is where I'll apologize to you guys because I'm new, I had spoken to Lori and Jim about putting that all into one line item that was shift coverage as opposed to just labeled as overtime, so that you knew that that money was going towards shift coverage. And I think that got moved into the overtime line and it was kept as overtime.
You don't have any call company members that are interested in working, is that what you said?
Correct.
It's not a question of qualification, they aren't interested in working.
There are a few. I think I only have one that might be qualified at this point, but has not expressed the interest to do it.
And you pay a call firefighter $18 an hour to roughly?
Correct, yes.
And so, we did have the option, we would offer them a half shift as opposed to a full shift. So,
Yep.
And we message them every time a shift gets posted. There's a specific group that's everybody that's eligible to cover shifts gets a message regardless of your employment status.
you know, you certainly would think, I mean that's over if somebody could actually cover a whole shift, that's over $400 for them,
Correct.
which would be a very good
Yeah.
part-time
Yep.
job.
Who is first choice, the part-timer?
That's identified in the collective bargaining agreement.
Right, I'm asking,
Yeah, I think
How was it identified?
the full-timer has the ability to take that shift first. But, and I'll be honest with you, it doesn't happen all the time. We have a lot of shifts that people are forced to work because nobody wants to work them.
And I think that there may be, I'd have to have the CBA in front of me, there may be a provision if openings within 2 weeks of the
Correct.
scheduled date, that anybody
Yep.
has the bite at the apple. So that,
Yeah.
there is a right of first refusal, but it doesn't seem to have an impact. That right only exists for like 72 hours as well, so
Correct.
it is on a leash.
They're still active. I mean, with the Showman's Fire, the 2 guys that were on the ladder truck were volunteer guys.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
You know, so they're still
Yeah,
active.
yeah, and I don't want that to be that they're not being active members of the department. They're certainly, they're there when we call them in. Some days are better than others, and in their defense, they've got other jobs, they've got other commitments, and at 3 o'clock in the morning, coming in for multiple calls is not gonna be something they're gonna wanna do when they have to be up for a family obligation at 6 or 7 o'clock in the morning. But we do have an active call department. For the ones that I do have, they are active.
You know, going back a few years, but 10 years ago, Littleton lost 2 call company members that any fire department should want to have.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
Didn't bother even conducting an exit interview as to why.
Mhm.
you lose those kind of quality people because basically they didn't feel welcome.
Yep.
I mean, that's a bad culture.
It is. And I've heard that from a lot of people, both in the department, outside the department, from some of my mutual aid partners, trying to kind of change that mentality. So it's and we rely on our call firefighters, just like I rely on our mutual aid partners that are volunteer and call firefighters to back us up.
And to go back to Chad's comments earlier about mutual aid, there were periods in time where area towns didn't want our mutual aid. So if it was a one-way street, it's because we weren't conducting ourselves the way we should have been. So
I think you've hit the nail
it's
on
something
that.
which I hear truthfully from the same people has improved under your tenure. So
All right, good. I was going to say, hopefully that is improving. That's the impression that I'm getting from talking to people, but I don't want to.
some of those things die hard.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. It takes a long time to overcome those. And I'm aware they're there, and I'm working on it, and I'm talking to individuals trying to bring them back onto the department to get them involved.
Excellent.
So it's not lost on me. I'm aware of it, and it's a challenge, but it's one that I've identified that I'm moving on to and working on.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Let's see, the next question was the overtime account, ending in 140. That was the one that had 40,433 budgeted in 2021, and 2022 is proposed increase to 60,494. That was one where we shifted that $20,000 over to that with the hopes of calling it, if you will, shift coverage, because it doesn't matter if I have a full-timer or a call firefighter, they're covering a shift. However, my assumption is it's probably going to go back to the way it was before, just because it seems to be that that's what people prefer, but I'm not sure.
Are you referring to the call?
Just where it's diagnosed, where it's put into the line item as overtime, I'm looking at it as shift coverage. It doesn't matter who works it, that's the line item I'm taking money out of.
As far as the line item though that had to do with call company firefighters,
Yeah.
that was installed because we wanted to see
Yep,
what that number actually was. Because,
okay,
the excuse always was, well, nobody wanted it or nobody was qualified to do it.
okay.
I think shift coverage was eliminated because whenever somebody covered a shift, you pay them overtime. So you put it all in overtime. Because when you run workers' comp reports and things, they want to know what you paid in overtime.
What do we
So
pay shift
if that's
differential?
truly,
There is none.
There is none in the fire department, nope.
No, okay.
all right.
Excuse me, what types of expenses are paid out of the unanticipated reimbursement expense? Account 4200180. There currently are no funds expended in this year with a $5,000 budget and no expenses last year with a $1,000 budget. Why the increase? This line item was used for matching grant money, is what my understanding is. If we get a grant through the government that we're required to have a matching fund for type of thing. There is one coming up for vehicles that there's a grant for that is a matching fund of between $5,000 and $10,000, and I believe that's why that increase is there, is just to cover anything if we were to get $50,000 or $60,000 for a vehicle, that we could match that with a $5,000 payment. That's what that line is for. The next one was on educational stipend, which is a new one for $7,000. The question was, is this truly new or has it always been paid out but included in permanent positions line item? If new, what promoted the addition? This has always been there. It's accounted for, and Lori might be able to better explain where it was accounted for before, but these are certain educational incentives that the firefighters will get upon getting their bachelor's, their associate's degree, or some of the specialized rescue certifications that they get. And this was done to just basically identify that, because it's something that is paid out.
And looking back at past budgets, I don't see any indication of educational incentives being budgeted for.
Okay.
So it wasn't probably included in the.
Probably the payroll salary.
No, I mean, I don't think it was budgeted for, but it was paid.
But it was paid
It
out.
showed up in the payroll,
Yeah.
but not in
Yeah.
the line
That's why
item that you
have
saw,
the-
yeah.
That's why you have an over expenditure of the budget in
Yeah.
the fire line. That would be part of it.
Yep. Equipment purchases, fire account 422001740. $7,300, 22 budget. What type of equipment would this cover? The question was hoses, and yes, it does cover hoses, hand tools, lights, pump fittings for the apparatus, those types of things that we'll purchase. Which brings us to the next one, which was general supplies, fire account 422002610, $38,870. What type of expenses would this cover? This covers our fire gear, the PPE that the firefighters wear, the radios, pagers, gloves, and helmets, some of the extrication equipment, and the foam that we'll use for fighting fire, the Class A foam. So that's what comes out of that line item. How is the cost accounted for when fire department responds to an ambulance call? For fire or ambulance charge, or how do they account for it? We break that down by, if you will, on the invoice and stuff when something happens. If for like fuel and stuff, I've got that broken out between EMS for the ambulances and the quick response vehicle that we have for ambulance calls versus the fire apparatus. Same thing with vehicle maintenance. I break those out by the ambulance versus the fire side of things. We talked a lot about the Hopkinton rescue equipment, so I won't go over that one. How many full-time EMS positions in the budget? For 2021, that was the one where I believe we had 5 that was in there. We've attributed 3 to the EMS position. Any plans for part-time EMS full-time equivalent positions proposed for 2022? My answer for that was no. I don't have any plans for any new positions for EMS, and I'm not sure if that answers the person's question. Okay.
That's, yeah.
What are the total vehicles, ambulances for this department as of October 31st, 2021? Ambulances, we have 2. Engines, we have 2. We have 1 ladder. We have 1 tanker. We have 2 staff vehicles. And then we have the rescue truck from Hopkinton with, I believe, 3 trailers. What is the cost least of a new ambulance? And that kind of depends on what is bought. Basing off of the last ambulance that we bought, which was about $260,000 for the ambulance itself. Right now, that would probably be up at, I'm going to guess, at about $290 with just inflation over the last couple of years.
When you say the ambulance itself,
Yep.
meaning
The vehicle.
The vehicle, the ambulance, and not all the supplies on it.
Not the equipment.
Correct.
just the cabin chassis.
Just the cabin chassis. Yep.
And
Yep. And there are different styles of ambulances. When you see some of the van style ones that are going up down the highway doing a lot of transfers and stuff, those ones are not as expensive because they're not built for the same, if you will, to handle the same road conditions. Those are pretty much highway trucks. Lancaster uses those for some of their transfers. The truck that we use, which is really called a Type 1 ambulance and stuff, it's got that heavy duty, if you will, pickup truck style chassis with a big box on the end that's designed for some of the harder conditions that we're in with the snow and ice in the road conditions, but it also gives more room for that emergency treatment at the scene of a car accident or cardiac arrest, where you have people on the back of the truck working on the patient and trying to get around them to, if you will, put the different devices, splints, the cardiac monitors on them. The van style ones that you see that are a lot cheaper and stuff, those ones are, when you come out with that patient from the hospital, they're already on the machines, they're being loaded into the ambulance, and there's usually only 1 or 2 people that have to sit in there to monitor those machines, which is why they're smaller, more fuel efficient. When is the lease purchase of a new replacement ambulance scheduled? We've designed it every 5 years, so the next truck would be in 2024 is when we would be looking at a replacement. The idea with that is right now we have, and the current lease that we have covers the ambulance and the heart monitors and everything that was required for the ambulance service. And I believe we're at about $90,000 is what that is every year for a lease payment. And the hope would be is that when that ambulance is paid off, the used ambulance that we bought, that we can look at trading that or downgrading that one and just roll that lease payment over without having to cause, if we need another ambulance, a big tax increase to the town. Whether we do a lease purchase or it's put into a capital program every year, that's the mentality, is just to keep that so that it stays stable. I'm just gonna answer the ones that I have the questions for. What is the cost least of a new ambulance? Again, that depends on what is bought. Jumping down, what geographical areas are covered under the other areas that we covered as Sugar Hill and Easton? And we went over what the service charges were. And we also explained somebody had caught onto the decrease in the fire budget, the EMS budget and the increase in the fire budget for salaries and personnel. And that was those two, if you will, people that were moved from one to the other in the upcoming budget. Did you have the answers for the collection?
So the sheets I passed around, or I hope they get all the way around.
Did they get all the way around?
I see some here.
Oh.
Did you get one?
Which one?
It was this one and then the pie chart.
Oh, I have those,
Yeah,
yeah.
so hopefully that answers the majority of that.
Yes.
And the only thing I don't have an answer for is what's the average rate for northern New Hampshire or New Hampshire? And I'm not sure if what is meant by that is what's the charge for like ALS 1 emergency
Well, I guess,
versus.
like, for example, maybe what Lancaster, what their collection experience is, or what in the Berlin area, just to get a, is our collection agency doing, the job that one would expect for this area, or is it lacking in some
So,
areas?
all right, so, yeah, so I think what you really are looking for, and please correct me if you're wrong, because I want to make sure I get it right, is basically how good of a job is our
how
collection
effective are
agency
they in collecting?
doing? I know that we do, as far as I can tell, they do very well for the information that we provide them. We go above and beyond in providing information to them. I'll give you just one small example. So when somebody from out of town gets hurt here or sick and we bring them to the hospital in the ambulance, they register them really quickly into the hospital system. And usually, because it's not the normal registration process, I give them a name and a date of birth, maybe an address. They give what's called a face sheet, which is a common piece of paper in healthcare, which basically is patient demographics and payer information. And they'll label the patient as self-pay. It's like a default in the system. So we could just send that to our billing company as is. Anything that's self-pay, we hold on to for 3 weeks. And then we follow back up with the hospital, say, hey, Joe Schmo, do they have any insurance information? And they'll be like, oh, yep, we got it from them, and it's this information. So then we'll go back and go through the billing quality assurance program that we run internally to make sure we have the date of birth right, social security, all that information right, update the insurance information from self-pay to whatever it is, and ship it to the billing company. As opposed to just shipping it out and having that land on the patient's mail saying that they owe X number of dollars, and maybe they send it to their insurance or maybe not, because it's confusing sometimes. They have insurance. I'm not paying that. I got insurance. Like, I didn't know I got insurance. It must be. So we do a lot of that type of stuff to make sure that we get really good data into the system for them.
But even that said, if you look at the pie chart, 59% of the calls
Are self-pay, which are a significant number of uninsured. Medicare and Medicaid. Those are the three areas that are never going to reach the level of you want unless you then have what you call a very aggressive collection. There's a difference between what we're doing. We're billing.
Yeah, and hoping for the best.
We're not chasing people.
Right.
And
Which
that's the difference
yeah,
between
you've
the
got-
government model versus the private sector
Right.
model, that this private pay, they're gonna go after you, they're gonna
Right.
take you to collections and maybe even to bankruptcy, I mean, whatever it took. And so on that aspect, so unfortunately, now where I'm from, the Medicare portion is a much bigger portion that you see of the building, Florida. Yeah, I mean, in terms of that, but it still doesn't get you any more money, I mean, in the sense that this is a common breakdown that you'll see, that about 60% of what you pick up, and sometimes this number of uninsured could be almost as much as 50%. So I mean, so the mix that you get, unfortunately, isn't the best the way
work
our
with, right.
national healthcare system is.
23% be consistent with Florida too?
Um,
I mean, is that number?
Yeah,
Regardless of
yeah,
the
and
mix,
for-
the net.
How, and again, it doesn't change our budget here, how they address for it down there, and I'll give you an example, in Lake County, which is where I was managing, is you get your tax bill, and here you get the state, the county, or the two schools, the city and the county. There would be another millage on there, it might be .43, but that is specifically dedicated to EMS. So therefore, they do bill, and they'll get what they can, but instead of chasing people and going from there, everybody is paying a portion of that across.
Thank
And so,
You have to go?
I might,
He does.
yeah.
Okay.
So the same, yeah, it's a loss everywhere in terms of governmental basis. It's just a matter of how other people make up that difference. And what they do down there is they may tax everybody in the county a millage to offset the loss.
How does your collection company, how are they compensated?
They get a percentage of
They
the
do.
bill, but they're.
Okay, so there's an incentive for them
Correct.
to go out there and
To a point, yeah, but they're not contracted to what I would call chase what might be that person who didn't send in the check.
We can actually kick it up a couple notches and have them, because they'll get a percentage of it, and they're happy to do it to start going after people. And this is just my personal opinion as your fire chief. I don't want to do that, because it means that Mrs. Smith is going to come in and she is going to go to collections and stuff, and she's going to be coming in saying, I don't have any insurance, I paid for my, and these are people that want to pay their bill. And it's one of those things, I look at that's a cost for the fire department to do. I don't like it when people are chasing those bills down and stuff. It just, to me, it's wrong. It should be an essential service, like through the government, like fire and police is, but it's not. So it allows things for that to happen.
what, in your pie chart, what is concurrent?
That means we're having more than one call for service at a time. So, like our ambulance was just dispatched to the
Fire
Lane
truck
House.
goes and an ambulance goes and.
Well, it doesn't matter what the call is necessarily, but like right now, our ambulance was just dispatched to the Lane House. And if we were to get another ambulance call right now, or any other call, that's a concurrent call. And so now, we have to staff that, we have to manage that. And what we didn't have with our contractor is the ability to have two ambulance calls staffed at the same time. We had one ambulance, and we're regularly doing that now. It's a very rare time where we have to call for mutual aid because either we don't have both ambulances available, either staffed or there's a mechanical issue.
Right.
All right, so we're getting close to the witching hour here. I do think that we need to make a motion to ask the select board to look into the fee structure. Do we want to do that? Or
I'll make the motion.
Or even a broad one, and to convene
Reach out to other areas of town.
an area of,
Start a
area of-
discussion.
Yes, that's what I said, something greater, because that's what I think the answer is, not to say that little one-on-ones couldn't make some adjustments, but I think.
And I think it needs to be done at the select board level, because, no offense to fire chiefs everywhere, they're gonna wanna keep their kingdom as it is.
To be 100% honest with you, that was much more the case in Southern New Hampshire. I've always been a proponent of a regional system, whether it's county or a region. Southern New Hampshire was much more a fiefdom with the fire chiefs. I think the fire chiefs in this area are much more inclined to do it. I think it may be that they're running up to some resistance from their government, the Board of Selectmen or whoever it is, that's saying, we're not sure we want to give that up. We don't know what that means for us. And this is the first time I've ever sat with an elected board that was actually wanted to pursue this and look at it. So I applaud you guys for that, because I think there is cost savings that are there. And I think there are better ways of doing business on a regional approach.
so who wants to make the motion?
I'll make the motion that we urge the selectmen to look into a I don't know if, yeah, mutual aid isn't quite right, is
You
it?
want me to help with some, I can
Yeah,
offer
I was just gonna say
to,
that.
for the select board to review the contracted EMS service rates, which is how we bill
And-
other
And
communities.
research a regional.
Are we
approach.
talking,
And
regional
research,
approach?
yes, a
Yeah,
regional
research
approach.
and regional approach,
Yep.
that's probably as good as we can.
For the record, can I get a name for the motion?
John Goodrich.
John Goodrich.
Yeah,
I'll
that's right,
second.
yeah. And seconded by Dan Stearns. And all in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 in favor, and I don't vote unless there's a tie. So, thank you. They told me I couldn't vote unless there was a tie.
Oh, sorry to hear that.
It was close. You didn't really vote.
So, I thank you. If any of you have additional questions when you go home and you can't think of anything else but this, just let us know, and I'll transfer the information to them with the questions. I appreciate all the work, and I hope this was a good discussion for you.
It was great.
Seriously, any questions?
Yep.
Sometimes the best ideas happen at midnight, and, we like to think we got a pretty good handle on things, but somebody may have a different approach, and
Yep.
I'm all about it.
So that kind of, do you have a comment?
Just like, a closing comment would be that, I mean, obviously, we're all looking for the best for Littleton, the best for the area. We want to have good employees, we want to have good jobs, but my gut feeling still is that, the nature of the union contracts, whatever, leave the system open to abuse. Probably some people aren't gonna like the term abuse, but then when you talk about the amount of overtime pay that's involved, the amount of shift coverage, the amount of vacation time that necessitates shift coverage, you can take an individual day that would be that $500 day and turn it into $800 pretty quickly or more. And it's just in supporting the program, if this is where we're going to go forward, we internally need to come to a realization that this is going to be good for, but we can't break the camel's back. I mean, the amount of overtime. I mean, things need to be realistic and reasonable. And years ago, Linda Ward and I had done a review of pay in the fire department, and when you go down and you look at the time cards, and you had somebody that was working on Monday that took the day off, and they were covered by this other person, and then this other person was scheduled to work Thursday, and they had that day off, and who worked for them on Thursday? The person who took the Monday off. I mean, at that time, it was amounted to relatively small dollars compared to today. It was about $60,000 a year, which involved 5 firemen and $12,000 and a piece, which, obviously we want people to have good earnings and, a living wage and support a family or whatever, but the taxpayer's got to pay for it, and when you're looking for expanding services and whatever, and you're going to get support for that, you got to make sure you get the taxpayer behind you.
And it all has to be transparent. I think this is what this committee just encourages on all levels, is transparency. The truth will set you free, right?
Good, bad, or indifferent,
Yeah.
just tell it the way it is, because if you try to hide it or, coat it in different type of a light or whatever, it will blow up on you.
So I thank you again, and
You're
I just have a couple of things left for the committee. Looking at our schedule, it has been a little bit different this year. 3 of the Thursdays that we would normally have with the town, we are now doing that with the school. And this would, right now, we only have this Thursday scheduled with the town. I'm wondering if we, and I know that Mike can't do it, and I'm looking at different Thursdays. We have a Thanksgiving in here, and then one of the Thursdays is a holiday, veteran, So I was hoping that you would consider meeting on a Tuesday here. It would be next Tuesday and the following Tuesday, and I think the week after that is Thanksgiving, and we'll just keep that week kind of open. Would it be okay to have a Tuesday meeting 2 weeks in a row? Sorry.
It works better for me, honestly.
Okay.
The
Well,
the 18th,
let's see.
11/9 and 11/17?
16.
16.
16,
No,
yeah.
16,
Got it,
yeah.
I
And
wrote
we can
16,
meet
not
here,
16.
we have this available here. So those two meetings would be here, so it'd be next Tuesday and the following Tuesday. So we can, and Lori and Jim and I will look at what other departments we can bring forward. I know that we want to look at Parks and Rec, and we probably a couple of other
Yeah,
things.
I already had
still have
welfare
the
scheduled
school
for
on
Thursday, December 2nd,
I think so.
and Park and Rec for Thursday, December 9th. So you're saying to cancel those meetings?
All right, we'll look at the
And
different,
here,
we'll
or
look,
Are you
yeah.
canceling those and add, or are you adding these in addition to those?
adding to them, and we're adding 2 more meetings, because we're gonna actually get, we know at the very end, when we're looking at a lot of the warrant articles, and there's a lot of discussion, I'd like to, concentrate on those in December, so if we can move some.
Leave those dates, the departments
Yes.
themselves will move into these 2 dates.
Yes,
Okay.
definitely, because we will have warrant articles that we would have to discuss, and I think the select board this year are going to decide which warrant articles come to us, is that how it is? I think, maybe, or all warrant articles, okay. So anyhow, what, Tuesday, so that works?
Could we do, instead of Tuesday, the 16th? I was asked to be out of town on the 18th, and I said I have this meeting on the 18th.
Oh,
Can I have it moved to that Tuesday?
well, I think that's,
So,
18th, I think, is the school.
so we're still gonna have a meeting on the 18th for the school.
yes,
Okay.
So I still can make that one. Can we move the 16th, the proposed 16th to the Monday, the 15th? If that's the same day.
I
then
would
can
have
make
to
that
see if this is available here,
one. Okay.
but
Well,
does,
you can at least ask us if the date's okay for everybody.
is the date okay for everybody?
15th doesn't work for me, but, you're probably not gonna get everybody, so
Yeah, we'll just stay on a Tuesday, Thursday, because that's what we've done in the past, and that's kind of what my,
yeah. And I
so
gotta
I
tell
don't
you,
forget to show up.
the 18th, I will not make it, I can't make it,
Okay,
I've got a conflict.
all right. There will be one other thing too, that I'll bring the wording to you, and it's on the school, and I have to prepare it, but maybe we can talk about it next Tuesday. On the town ballot, the tax impact is listed in each warrant article, what the tax impact is gonna be. I would like to bring forward the same scenario for the school side. So I will get the wording, and we would have to have 20 signatures, but I would also want to bring it forward to the budget committee for their endorsement, so.
Probably get 7 signatures right there.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's been talked about, and that would be a very good idea.
Yeah, because now, and then if Lori at some time could let us know when petition warrant articles, the dates, the budget hearing, the deliberative session, the last date to bring petition warrant articles forward.
I think that's already passed. I think the calendar's already gone out to you.
Oh, those dates have already been.
They've already been established and we sent them out earlier.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry, I didn't
Yeah.
see that. So, so anyhow, that's good. Anything else before the committee? Okay. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
No move.
Okay, let's go. Thank you.